The Middle East is once again on fire, this time quite literally. Tehran and Tel Aviv are locked in a dangerous tit-for-tat, pushing the region and perhaps the entire world to the edge of an all-out war. Iran launched massive missile strikes on Israel, targeting dozens of military installations, air bases, and strategic zones. Smoke billowed over Tel Aviv with explosions shaking Jerusalem as civilians rushed to shelters. This assault follows Israel's deep strike attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, especially the Isfahan site, a key hub in Iran's uranium enrichment effort. And before that, the Natanz facility. Israel says its offensive was aimed at preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, vowed heavy blows and says these retaliatory attacks, these are ongoing, are just the beginning. Now, who has the upper hand? Let's have a battlefield breakdown. If we look at the air power, Israel possesses air superiority with F-35 stealth jets, real-time satellite surveillance, and pinpoint strike capabilities. Iran, while lagging in modern aircraft, has made up ground with long-range missiles, drone swarms, and logistic capabilities that now threaten Israel's heartland. And let's look at the naval power. Israel commands a stealthy submarine fleet in the Mediterranean equipped with potential second strike nuclear capability, whereas Iran dominates the Strait of Hormuz with asymmetrical naval power. They have speedboats, underwater mines, and suicide drones, making the Gulf a potential death trap for foreign ships. If you look at the strength of the troop, Iran commands over 500,000 ground troops, not to mention a vast network of proxy militias in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Israel, with roughly 170,000 active soldiers, boasts better trained forces and elite units with one of the fastest mobilization systems in the world. Let's also look at the cyber warfare. Both nations are seasoned players in cyber ops. Iran has launched repeated cyber attacks on Israeli water systems and infrastructure. Israel, meanwhile, has historically led high-level cyber sabotage, as seen in the Stuxnet virus that crippled Iran's centrifuges over a decade ago. But what's the bottom line? Israel leads in tech and precision. Iran dominates through reach and resistance. Israel has quality, Iran has quantity. It's a conflict between quality and quantity now. Let's ask about the Trump White House war, or is it a deal? President Donald Trump, now back in the White House, faces perhaps his most explosive foreign policy test. Interestingly, Trump has publicly called for bringing Iran to the negotiating table, despite overseeing the collapse of the original Iran nuclear deal during his first term. Is this a change of heart or just classic Trump turning war into a deal-making opportunity, and will he be able to do so? Inside the administration, hawkish voices are pushing for full military support to Israel. But Trump, ever the strategist, is also watching the 2026 midterms and knows that another full-scale war in the Middle East could tank markets and his approval ratings. The world is waiting. Will Trump flex America's might or broker the deal of the century between two sworn enemies? And what about markets react? The volatility unleashed. If we see, oil prices surged beyond $115 a barrel. Any threat to Iran's Strait of Hormuz means immediate global shockwaves. Gold spiked as global investors ran to safety. Tel Aviv Stock Exchange suspended trading amid this ongoing panic. US defense stocks skyrocketed while Asian markets dipped sharply. Global shipping, energy supply, and Middle Eastern tourism are on the brink of collapse. The post-pandemic recovery may now face its deadliest enemy yet, and that's war. And what's the impact on the Indian market? The subcontinent feels the shock waves. India, a massive energy importer, is particularly vulnerable to Middle Eastern instability. Here's how the war could directly affect India. If we see the crude oil prices, it's a burning burden. India imports nearly 85% of its oil, a bulk of it from the Gulf. With the Strait of Hormuz under threat, oil prices may skyrocket, forcing India to spend billions more in imports. And the result? Rupee depreciation, fuel price hikes, and inflation spike. Stock market volatility, if we see that, the BSE, Sensex, and NSE Nifty have already shown sharp dips as war fears unsettle foreign investors. And the sectors that hit the hardest: aviation, rising fuel cost, automobiles, FMCG, and logistics. But defense and energy stocks may benefit. Trade routes, of course, are in danger now. India's exports to the West often move via the Suez Canal and Red Sea. Already they are tensed due to Houthi activity. A wider war would cripple shipping lanes, delay deliveries, and push up cost. Gulf workforce and remittances are also at risk. Over 9 million Indians work in the Gulf, especially in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. A full-scale war could trigger mass evacuations or even job losses, choking remittance flows into India. And gold and currency hedging, with the Indian population's deep trust in gold, demand may soar. But this also increases the import bill, affecting the current account deficit. Are we seeing a wider war? The shadows of Hezbollah and beyond Hezbollah in Lebanon is reportedly preparing cross-border operations. Houthi rebels in Yemen have expressed solidarity with Iran, threatening Israeli and US naval assets. Saudi Arabia and UAE, though wary of Iran, are urging restraint, fearing escalation on their own soil. Russia and China have accused the Trump administration and Israel of provocation, warning against expanding the conflict. This is no longer just war. It is no longer just Iran versus Israel. This is a Middle Eastern fuse burning at both ends. So who will win? If it comes down to technology, Israel has sharper blade. But if it becomes a war of attrition, insurgency, and alliances, Iran's reach and resilience could outlast its enemy. And we must ask, if Hezbollah launches thousands of rockets from the north and Iran's proxies attack from all sides, can Israel withstand a multi-front siege? Meanwhile, UN emergency meeting was held and diplomacy versus destruction could be seen. The UN Security Council convened an emergency closed-door meeting after Israel's strikes on Iran's military and nuclear sites. With over 100 Iranian drones in the skies, the UNSC is calling for immediate ceasefire, protection of civilians, prevention of wider conflict. But will words stop weapons? Meanwhile, we can also see celebrations erupt in the Arab world. As Iranian missiles lit up the night sky over Tel Aviv, celebrations broke out across the Arab world, from Tehran to Palestine, Lebanon to Yemen. Crowds gathered in the streets, cheering what they called a moment of resistance. In Tehran, bike rallies and public screenings displayed nationalist pride. In Gaza and Beirut, people waved flags, danced, and chanted slogans against Israel. In Sana'a, Yemenis filmed the sky with joy, calling it a strike for dignity. What Israel calls terrorism, they are calling justice. This isn't just war, it's narrative warfare. Whereas Israel vows to continue, despite Iran's retaliation, Israel remains defiant. Israeli military sources say operations will continue until strategic objectives are met. That includes crippling Iran's nuclear program, neutralizing missile stockpiles, targeting Hezbollah, Hamas, and IRGC positions in Syria and Lebanon, Prime Minister Netanyahu has declared. He said, "We are not seeking war, but we will not retreat from our red lines." The questions that must haunt us now: can Trump contain this war without sending American troops? Can Israel survive a regional blowback it helped ignite? Will Iran cross the nuclear threshold, or is it preparing for? And most importantly, are we watching the end of diplomacy in the Middle East, or just the beginning of World War III in slow motion? For more updates and deep insights as the war continues, keep watching The Global Eye.